My name is Sherry Sontag, and I am here to talk to you about bringing consensus to the workplace. What do I mean by that? Well, hang on. Can I make that work? Okay. All right. I come from Bloomberg, and Bloomberg is sort of unique because unlike companies that have, I'm going to just stay on this side, unlike companies that have one major product, we have a terminal that has thousands of products. And people who have our terminal pay tens of thousands of dollars to have access to it. So unlike Google, where you all log into Google and it's going to work the way it works and maybe they'll change it, people who buy our terminal expect that when they needed to do a certain computation, it's going to do it. When it's always worked a certain way, it's going to work flawlessly. They are trading lots of money. They are getting very important data. As a result, our developers who work with these clients are very, very independent. They operate like hundreds of startups. So here I am in infrastructure, and it is very important to me to not come down and dictate, this is how you're going to develop your code. These are the rules I think make sense, or these are the rules that me and my team make sense. There needs to be a lot of freedom. So if we think that we are going to make any changes, there needs to be a lot of communication. Well, who am I? I have a journalism degree. I got it from Columbia. I worked in the engineering school library for a while. I have a journalism degree. What I did before Bloomberg is I left my job and I wrote a book about submarines and spies during the Cold War. The book got ditched by its first publisher, who swore it would never sell, got picked up by somebody who was courting our agent who thought we were nothing, and then it sold 1 million copies. But I still have a journalism degree. I wrote my master's thesis on the mainframe because my friends were all getting computer science degrees. I don't know if that helps. The book got quoted in West Wing. That was especially fun when I was showing my kids West Wing, and suddenly my book was being quoted. I had forgotten it happened, so that was good. I ended up in Bloomberg Engineering because somebody at Bloomberg literally tripped over me and decided that if I can get submariners to tell me their secrets, because this stuff was all classified and still is, then I can get a bunch of developers who are being introduced to the first set of rules they had to follow to actually maybe come off the ledge and listen. They didn't tell me that. I got there thinking I was going to write a little bit of documentation, and all of a sudden out came the book about linkers, loaders, Lacosian libraries. I walked home that day and every day for a couple months telling my dad they're going to have to fire me. I don't understand a word anybody says all day long. Funny thing happened though. You guys are just, I love you. You are the people who sat down and taught me what I needed to know. You pulled out books, you pulled out examples. I would walk out of talks and said, what was the point? You would teach me enough so that I began to understand who you were. And there was a relationship there that never went away. And when we would go on like Bob events, my kids would have a busload of people saying, oh, your mom really saved my life, but you guys saved mine. I'm very fond of C++ developers. So for a long time, I was helping create libraries. We had some names, but it was really about 10% of the code base because Bloomberg you could opt in to a lot of what we were doing. And we had this thing called RoboCop, and only a few people opted in, about 10%. But then, parallel to us, another team developed another build system with a very low barrier to entry that was it was more robust. And as our tools got better, people started going in, and all of a sudden we had about 80% of the library code there. And it was an opportunity to say, maybe now we can get together and create some standards. Now, how many of you want a journalist telling you how to name your code? Anybody? Very good, thank you. I adopted him already. But, it wasn't about what I thought was going to be the right thing, right? It was going to be about what everybody else thought was the right thing. And really, this talk is going to be less important for how we named our C++ code, which some of you will say, huh, and some of you will say, that is bizarre. It is much more about how I got everybody talking to each other. The first rule of this was be open. Remember that people are going to tell you what they think and need to. Be generous. Recognize that people really want to do the right thing. Nobody is lazy. Nobody just doesn't care. You guys care a lot about quality, but you have a lot of other things going on too. And finally, be humble. If any of you are out in infrastructure, you need to approach, no matter how smart you are, you need to remember that the guy working in his area knows about his area more than you do. For me, that was easy. I come knowing nothing. So I am completely open to being convinced. And most important, ask questions. Good thing you had a journalist in the room, guys. Okay, so as I hinted before, when we decided to try to build consensus, we dove into the deep end. Why pick up C++ naming conventions? Well, we had John Lakos, and in that 10% of code where we had dominion over the rules, we had actually created a little bit of history. Lakos believed in package groups. Libraries were 3 letters long. Namespaces within those libraries were named for packages. You add 1 to 5 alphanumeric characters. And everybody else, just to save potential package group space, they were 9 or more characters. And people in the beginning were adding libs, utils to absolutely every name they came up with. And it made me a little nuts because I'm a writer. So I started asking questions. Database access library? How about FUBAS DBACC? Message libraries, SVC MSG. Value semantic types libraries, ended in types. It'll be long enough, you'll be saying what it is. And one day somebody from internal systems came up to me and said, we have such a beautiful code base. There are layers. You always know where everything belongs and everything has its place. It was just because I couldn't help writing. So now that we had everybody in one place, could we get them to agree that having at-a-glance metadata, this library contains this as a name, made sense, that the headers would be named for that, and maybe once and for all, it would all start with the namespace. The namespace would name the header prefix, it would name the library, everything that belonged with everything would be there. And could we also, by the way, the fact that I only had dominion over 10% of the code base meant people would do what they wanted and then need a client in my corner of the world, and all of a sudden we're being told, well, your code isn't named properly. Can we also make enforcement early and warnings early and the rules consistent? So we needed to get buy-in. So the first thing we did is we went to people and said, okay, I went to people and said, I've been doing this for 12, 13 years. Do you hate it enough to throw it all away? Do you want to get rid of the long names? Do you want to get rid of the consistency? What do you think of what I have been selling all this time? And, in the beginning, people were kind of annoyed at me for it. So I really expected to have to eat a lot of crow. And a funny thing happened, at least with the people we were talking to then. It's kind of nice. We inherit a library or a task, we know what we call. And people haven't messed up the libraries we inherit because they were named in such a way that they didn't become bit buckets. We kind of like this. And I was very puffed up. I felt very important. I went back and said, really, they like me. It's incredible. And I told you about Lacosian package groups and all long names. We did that one. So they did ask for something. They said, the rules need to be clear, they need to be easy to follow, and we want to know about them before we do any real development. Some people even said, I'll do anything you want, just don't surprise me. It took us longer than we wanted to get to that point, by the way. And they wanted to be asked. So we have a group called the C++ Guild, and we talk to them, and they're supposed to be our local experts. And then there were the people whose code I refactored, and the people who asked me questions, and we went out to all of them, and we have a blast system where we sent out a missive. We're going to be looking at this. We thought we did a pretty good job of letting everybody else know. And we thought we were going to just enhance things, and we didn't realize, as we were planning our enhancements, as we were planning our naming schemes, we were actually talking to a fraction of the people because they were already the people who knew me. They were already the people who were listening. Just looking at time. Okay, good. So I had all the best intentions. I was going to research. Before I wrote an RFC, a request for comment, I was going to ask lots of questions. I was going to publish it. I was going to beg for debate. And I still was talking within an echo chamber of people who knew who I was. Well, they all knew who I am. I'm hard to ignore, but at least people who knew how this all worked. We did 3 requests for comment. Somebody came up with the idea of you should nest your namespaces. Like, think about how package groups, that 3-letter mnemonic would be branding within the library. What if you can take a parent namespace and just that would be your branding? And if you were going to make it longer, then you could add namespace identifiers to that. And now you would have libraries that all shared something, dash, maybe for, like, here's my name, I am transit, and my project is subways, and this architectural use is going to be DBACC. And then the next library would be I am transit, my project is subways, and the architectural use would be SVC MSG. Wouldn't that be clear? But what if somebody used subway as an identifier in another part? It was pointed out to us that we may end up with ambiguous namespaces because of the way C++ compiles. And they came up with the, my boss at the time came up with the idea that everybody could register their namespaces. They would just have a namespace registration step. And I thought nobody would buy into this, but people liked it because it was kind of an early warning. We could go to the registration step and they would tell us whether or not we were failing or passing whatever the rules were. And I was kind of surprised, but hey, consensus is consensus, we'll go along. And the next thing is we put out something that said, let's make sure all published code now maps to the series of identifiers which name the library, which name the headers. And that one sailed through too. And while we were looking at how to spell namespaces, would our guys want it to be long, we started turning on the idea that, are you registered or not? It'd be really simple. We'd register everybody ahead of time, and anything new would get a, you're not registered, you have to register. And we kind of found out that we weren't talking to everybody. We found out that suddenly there were a lot of people who had not heard a word about this, who were getting warnings, and they had warnings as errors turned on, and we were breaking them. So I thought, okay, we have to talk to more people. And I went to a friend of mine who happens to be on your standards committee. I went to Juan and I said, who's gonna like me the least? Who's gonna give me the biggest trouble here? He said, oh, the quants. The quants are gonna give us a really hard time. They're not gonna like you at all. So I reached out to Ray's group and we had a Zoom with about 5 or 6 people in it. And I asked them, how do you wanna spell your namespaces? I asked them number 3. Pay attention to the fact that I asked them number 3. And these guys actually like informative names. They were willing to even put Bloomberg in front of every Bloomberg library, so when they used third-party code, it would be clear. Nobody else bought that, by the way. They all yelled at me when I brought it up as a possibility. So I came back and said, wouldn't you know it? They're with us. They're on our team. I am just succeeding like nothing else. Yeah, everybody's real happy, and it was really way too easy. The next thing, we had this idea, the next thing that happened is we turned on the next set of rules. Now that we thought we had everybody, and we started breaking people again. And one of the things we had thought was, with each new identifier, you would be making a new library. So these strings would grow and grow and grow, right? If you wanted a new library name. We had completely not realized, I didn't know in the first place because I know nothing, but nobody told me that C++ developers use namespaces for internal organization as well. And by saying every time you add an identifier, you need a new library, it's like every time you get a new appliance, you need a new kitchen. It was getting a little bit silly. And we didn't know what we didn't know. I mean, I had asked the wrong questions. And we heard from our friends in the quant team again. And they were like, oh, there's no way we're doing this. And I was needing to learn what internal namespaces were. And I was like, just show me what's breaking, because I'll go back to my team and I'll tell them we've messed up. But at that point, it sounded like more debate. How many of you, when somebody says, oh, why don't you like our rules, expect people to say, oh, we'll change them, it's okay. But we meant it. We truly, truly meant it. And the hardest thing I had to do, and I think I did okay, was convince these guys that we did. And get them to sit down, teach us what we didn't know, or didn't realize, or didn't take into account. I'm sure the people around me knew things, and get us to fix what we did. So, where'd we land? We now say you could register your package leaf namespace. You can have a parent that's your branding, add your identifiers, end up with either a package group like Lycosium package group or a longer name. And in between identifiers, you could have non-word separators. But once you've named your package, anything you do after that, we don't look at, because we finally knew what we didn't know. And oh my God, so many people have told us they are so grateful to these guys for making sure we didn't completely break the world. We are still, I mean, this looks like it's so great and we've gotten so much done, but honestly, we are still learning. For instance, I've given this talk internally a couple of times, and you knew they were leaning forward when you heard we were annoying people. So I literally, the last time I gave it, I said, okay, who's pissed off and why? We still aren't reaching enough people. We have to find a way that when we're gonna touch anything, we get, like in the engineering newsletter, we walk the floors with a bullhorn saying, anyone who wants to talk to me, reach out. I have a list of anybody who's complained, so they are my canaries in the coal mine, and it's not long enough. If you guys are ever gonna try this kind of outreach, you have to know it's hard to reach people, because people are not listening for what you have to say. They're busy, right? They have better things to do. The next thing we learned is getting people to know that they needed to register when they published is too late. You guys do a lot of development before you publish. People have to know the minute they make a repo, or sooner if we can, but at least then. We need to automate it. So if we say you're not registered, register the damn thing for you. It's like we need to make it as easy as possible. But the other cool thing that's happened since I started giving this talk, I have a slice, yeah. The other cool thing that's happened since I started giving this talk is people are coming up to me and saying, this is what we need. We need a way to make our private code truly private. We need a way to make sure that when we're refactoring, we can find all of our clients. If you want us to rename stuff, we want there to be a little tool that we say old name, new name, and the new headers are made and the old headers are forwarding headers. There are pull requests for the clients. Make it easy, because we got a lot of other things to do. And our job cannot be, as much as we want good governance, cannot be following what you've asked for. But the most important thing is you're coming to me with things that they would like us to look at. Please look here. Please make this simpler. Please make it so that if I adopt a third-party library and stop using it, I don't own it for the rest of my life. And these are all things, I have a year or 2 years worth of RFCs in mind now. And the other good news is people believe me when I say, tell me what I don't know. They get it. They get the fact that I really want to do it better. Because in the end, I love the people I work with. And it's not just the other infrastructure people. I am beholden to the people who have taught me. And it kind of makes being a journalist in a software shop work. So be open, believe that people want to do the right thing, be humble, never believe that you always know what that is, be generous. find and include the people who are most likely to avoid you and give you a hard time. And one of the things I'm going to try to do for anybody who's interested, and I mean everybody outside of Bloomberg, is I am going to try to write kind of a recipe for how to avoid some of the pitfalls. Something that other people can follow that will make reaching consensus a little easier. Because honestly, in companies are big and people are busy. And you just have to have empathy for your audience. Same way I try to have empathy for the people hearing this talk. And I think I'll end it now.